the Al Udeid base. Those same officials say there are no reports of casualties. President Trump was meeting with his national security team in the Situation Room while all this was unfolding. It comes after 3 Iranian nuclear facilities were struck on Saturday. The U.S. military hit those sites with massive bunker buster bombs, dropped them from stealth planes, as well as dozens of missiles fired from submarines. In a social media post written after that the retaliatory strikes from Iran, President Trump wrote, quote, "The sites that we hit in Iran were totally destroyed and everyone knows it." Pentagon officials say it is too soon to tell the exact scope of the damage. Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba, NBC News national security reporter Gordon Lubold, and NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley in Tel Aviv. Matt, I'll start with you in the region. What are Iran and other countries saying about the effectiveness of this retaliatory strike?
Well, Iran released a statement saying that they were doing this in retaliation to the American strikes on those 3 nuclear sites that you just mentioned. They invoked Muharram, which is a holy month that begins in just a couple of days. Muslims throughout the world celebrate Muharram and observe it, but it's particularly important to Shiite Muslims, of whom they make a majority of the Iranian population. So this does fit into a lot of what we're seeing and a lot of what we've been discussing, how this is meant mostly for internal consumption within Iran. And we also know, based on the New York Times reporting, that the Iranians had tipped off the Qataris that they were going to be firing at the Al Udeid air base. Now, as you mentioned, this was just Al Udeid air base, even though there were airspaces that were closed in Kuwait and Bahrain, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates. So far, if the current assessment holds true, and if it doesn't look as though there were any real injuries among U.S. soldiers, it looks like this could be it. And it looks like this could be the kind of face-saving reprisal attack that the Iranians exercised back in 2020 when they launched attacks on a U.S. base in Iraq, the Al-Assad base, that was somewhat limited. And even though it did injure about 110 U.S. servicemen who all suffered from traumatic brain injuries, that was that. And a lot of people in the region are hoping that this is going to be the end of this too.
Matt, thank you. Let's go from the region to the White House. Monica, we mentioned that President Trump met with his national security team. What more are you learning from White House officials?
Well, look, Sinclair, they were scheduled to meet before all of this retaliation kicked off in this manner. We know he was going to be huddling with his national security team, but obviously they monitored all of this in real time from the Situation Room, we understand. And they really were watching and waiting to see if it was going to be just Qatar or if there were perhaps going to be any kind of missiles aimed at other U.S. bases in the region. As we've been discussing, they were sort of ready for that. They were sure that was a possibility, and so they had been on heightened alert even before the U.S. dropped those bombs on the nuclear sites in Iran, and especially after. So we're told that both the White House, the Department of Defense, no surprise there, have been closely following and monitoring all of this, but we haven't really heard from the president on this exact development, at least for now, because he's been focused, he says, on some other things, but it's possible that we could still see if he says something about this later today. But it's really notable, Sinclair, that this was something that they expected could possibly happen within 48 hours taking place, but I think a lot of relief and a lot of exhalation over the idea that so far there were no casualties reported.
Gordon, let's bring you in now. Can you give us some background on this airbase in Qatar, and what is the Pentagon saying about this attack?
Sure, of course. So it's a big, sprawling base that actually in recent years has been small. It made it a lot smaller. There's about, at any given day, maybe 5, 9, 10,000 American troops on this base. Play a critical role. Withdrawal from Afghanistan. It plays a critical role generally for the U.S. in the region. It's so big that it's easy to lob missiles at it and not necessarily hit anything or do any particular damage, and that's what Pentagon's saying, that no American casualties, no particular real damage to the base, but waiting to kind of see what could come next. But the Qataris and the Iranians tend to be somewhat linked, and so there's a sense that everybody was waiting for an attack like this, and so they were prepared for it before these missiles came.
Gordon, thank you. Matt, let's go back to you in the region. We know Israel launched more strikes at Iran today, including one of the nuclear sites targeted by the U.S. on Saturday. So what is the Israeli military saying about all that?
Yeah, well, the Israeli military are continuing with more of the same, attacking missile launchers, attacking nuclear sites, but more of what we've been hearing are command centers and offices belonging to some of the security structures of Iran. But also, this is what we've been hearing for the past couple of days. It looks as though the Israelis are expanding their targets and striking more of the internal security apparatus within Iran, symbols of the regime, as the Israelis have called it. And this is consistent with the drift in the mission that we've been seeing over the past couple of days, really over the past several weeks, as the Israelis have sort of changed their tune from striking uranium enrichment, nuclear facilities, to also striking symbols of the regime and talking more and more about the possibility of regime change.
And Monica, I want to end with you. You have some new reporting about how President Trump made the decision to strike Iran after what he said was a 2-week deadline. What have you learned?
Yeah, and this is something that really was notable in that he, for days, was talking about potentially giving diplomacy an opportunity here and saying that he had continued this direct and indirect conversation with key allies. And we know that there was some conversation between the president's special envoy and Iranian officials. But we are told that he really was leaning towards this idea of going forward with the strikes in Iran. On Friday, when he left for his property in New Jersey, we knew that he had sort of been talking to Pete Hegseth, the Pentagon chief, about giving the final go-ahead. And then on Saturday, when he did check in with the president to say, okay, are we a go? Are we definitely going to do this? That took place on Saturday as he was traveling back from New Jersey to the White House. And then they huddled together to watch how all that happened. And we're also learning, Zinclay, that the president yesterday was thinking about or expressing interest in wanting to travel to Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to greet the B-2 pilots who carried out this dangerous mission successfully. But ultimately that was scrapped due to some logistical challenges. But we're told the White House is working on this idea that maybe he will have a phone call with them because he wants to be able to thank them personally. Zinclay.
All right, Monica Alba, Matt Bradley, and Gordon Lugold, thanks so much. Even before today's response from Iran, the U.S. was warning of potential threats from Iran on American soil. NBC News has learned that in the days leading up to Saturday's attack, Iran privately messaged President Trump warning him that Iran could unleash terror attacks on America by activating sleeper cells it has inside the country. And on Sunday, the Department of Homeland Security issued a new bulletin warning of a, quote, heightened threat environment in light of this conflict. NBC News law enforcement and intelligence correspondent Tom Winter joins us now. So, Tom, to start, how credible is this risk of sleeper cells, and are there specific areas in the country that are on heightened alert?
Well, as far as the idea of sleeper cells, that's what Iran says. And it was using the best tool it had at the moment, sort of the one that's the most cost-effective, which is words and threats. And so sitting here today, am I aware of, is law enforcement aware of any sort of sleeper cell, any sort of a group of individuals who are ready to act out against Iran? No. Those individuals, if they are here, if they came here through the border, if they came here through some other sort of means, air, sea, those individuals, if they were ordered to conduct an attack on behalf of Iran, given the IRGC is a designated terrorist organization, same with Hezbollah, same with Hamas, they would be subject to immediate arrest. That's a federal crime. So I think law enforcement is acutely aware of the Iranian threat. There have been numerous arrests over the years of targeted plots on U.S. soil, individuals who've been conducting surveillance on U.S. soil, Boston, New York, Washington, D.C. But all of those individuals, the reason why I'm talking about these specific plots is because there were arrests and there were convictions and there's people that are sitting in jail. So I think there's a bit of a reality check versus what the Iranians are talking about versus what the U.S. Has already thwarted so far. But certainly given, to your point, the DHS memo, everybody is aware that this is a heightened threat environment. It has been for some time, certainly since October 7th, 2 years ago when Hamas conducted its attack against Israel. So everybody knows kind of the score here, knows what happened over the weekend, and they're closely tracking it.
But to that end, Tom, what kind of capabilities does Iran practically have to strike the U.S.? You mentioned Hamas, Hezbollah, both Iranian-backed proxy groups, but we know their intel power scaled back dramatically after the October 7th attacks.
That's exactly right. I mean, they're in shambles. So normally Hezbollah, and we've seen this in court documents associated with these convictions in these cases, these individuals who've been arrested here had trained with Hezbollah, had received, in some cases, several instances of training with Hezbollah, had been tasked by proxies for the Iranian regime. Hezbollah is a shell of itself. I mean, the Israeli military has dramatically weakened their capabilities. They've shown no interest to fight on behalf of Iran to their closest neighbor, let alone engage here in the United States at this point. But again, all that is a little bit of an asterisk because you're not sure what somebody else is going to do. And I think really the broader threat here is somebody who's upset about what's going on in the Middle East, upset about either U.S. policy, Israeli policy, something else, that will just want to conduct an attack on their own. That's really what law enforcement is focused on, and boy, are they focused on.
Sort of like a lone wolf situation.
That's exactly.
And just briefly, U.S. cities, I'm thinking New York, L.A., European cities, is there any increased risk in those areas?
Yeah, those are all cities that law enforcement is focused on because that's where Iran has shown interest in the past, so they're basing it off of that. And on top of that, they've got their resources out there. These are also big cultural centers, whether from the Islamic community, the Iranian community, the Jewish community. There's consulates in those places. There's some sort of a governmental presence. All of those things are kind of like beacons for somebody who would carry out the type of attack I was talking to you about. So that's why you're seeing an increased police presence at this hour. We've seen it since Saturday night. Frankly, we've seen it for the bulk